I think the one that immediately screams out to the top of the pack is the Wardley versus Clark rematch. Although you're suggesting that that fight, might not replicate the first one, I think it has all the possibilities that it could later on in the fight kind of devolve into that grueling kind of uh, blow for blow type of fest, which would make for good viewing between the two again. Outside of that, I mean, I think Opataya and Massey will be a better fight than maybe it seems to be on paper. I don't think Massey's proven himself to be a good fighter. I think he's only been down once in his career to Rakpo, who's a big heavy hitter himself. So he's a durable fighter who's added more of a boxing IQ with Joe Gallagher in his corner. I thought he fought very well against Isaac Chamberlain. That was a close fight in the scorecards, but I thought he won it a little bit better than the scorecards gave it to him. And Opataya just slowing down a little bit in the sense that the second half of the fight seems to be more of a problem than perceived beforehand. I mean, those two instances are against a real good fighter who's now since retired in the form of Myris Breedis. Real good fighter who probably could have had a few more fights if he wanted to, but probably just didn't fancy the climb back into that position. But they'll look at that and think there's an opportunity there. We've been up to heavyweight. We've taken Joe Parker the distance here. We can do something similar with Jaya Buttar. And if we don't win the title, but we put in a good performance, we elevate our stock. But if we win the title, then we're quids in here. We've got a real good opportunity here to really kind of go at some bigger fights in the division as well. But if you take out the number one gun, or the perceived one as well too, him and Crispin Smith can vie for that as well as Zurdo. But if they manage to upset the odds there, then it's a brilliant win for Massey and Joe Gallagher. But I think that'll be a real good fight between the two of them. Good to see Nicholson and Chapman. It's not the first fight for females over in that region, but hopefully it's not the last one either. Frank Warren was saying it wasn't that much of a hard task getting a female fight on again over there, and they've been asking to get a big fight where they've got that in the form of Nicholson and Chapman. Ben Whittaker will look to dazzle. There was a bit of confusion, Danny. I don't know if you saw this as to who the opponent was, because it was announced as Whittaker versus Cameron, but I don't know if you saw a poster that featured Whittaker versus Louis Edmondson. Did you see that?
I haven't. No, I've heard that it was out there, but I haven't seen the poster itself.
Yeah, I believe it is Liam Cameron who is the opponent there. But again, Liam Cameron's a real good, capable fighter. I don't think this will be a fight where we see too much of a joking around from Ben, unless it becomes like a real kind of difference in levels. But I think Ben will kind of show the respect to Liam, who's making his comeback off of his ban from the sport and was decent. Some fancied him actually to beat Lyndon Arthur. Good little affair between the both of them. But I think for me, out of the fights that are on there, outside of course Beterbiev versus Bivol, Wardley versus Clark is probably the best one. Opataya, then Massey next. The Eubank Jr, I'll put this in now, against Szeremeta, is a disappointing fight. I mean, Eddie alluded to when it came to him joining Boxer that he wanted a bit of a warm-up fight before he threw himself in with Canelo.
Two warm-up fights.
Well, two. I mean, you can kind of debate that with how close, or at least how far, or whatever the fallout was with the Canelo Alvarez fight. Maybe he should have took that fight when it was on the table for him. But Karol Szeremeta, most notably remembered for his defeat to Golovkin. I think it was his mandatory that he had to get rid of, and then he fought Jaime Munguia afterwards. I think he got stopped in like the 6th or 7th round or something along those lines. And I don't think he's fought, and I can't remember him being on any other card since, or any other fight since, or any sort of contendership type of fight in that division at all, which kind of tells you as to his ambitions in his career, as to where he is and what he's trying to do. He lands a big opportunity against Chris Eubank Jr., but I don't think there's any real danger, there's any real jeopardy in that fight. This is a good fight for Chris Eubank Jr., who, unless he's suddenly washed Eubank Jr., which is highly, highly doubtful, they should come through with flying colours. He'll look good. He'll get the opportunity to take the mic, and he'll call out Canelo, might even call out Golovkin again. He'll call out the big fights, but we'll see if he gets them. They've eluded Eubank Jr. for a while now, haven't they?
Yeah, I mean, it's a stinker, isn't it? And it's annoying as well because he's asked for 2 warm-up fights. They've not necessarily found space for that Matchroom. So he signed with Boxer, presumably because they've said they can do it for him. And the fact that one of those has ended up on one of the big Saudi shows is pretty galling, to be honest. And, you know, because when Warren says he's not interested in Eubank unless it's as an opponent for Shiraz or Bentley, and then you've got Eddie Hearn saying, yeah, well, he wanted 2 easy fights. So, you know, but he still ended up on a Saudi show, which, from what we've been led to believe, is mainly the purview of Warren and Hearn. And Boxer have only recently come to the party. And yet we still have to part with it. Szeremeta, as you know, a notable name purely because of the 2 fights that he's lost against Munguia and Golovkin. He's coming off a draw. He's got no notable wins on his record whatsoever. You know, Eubank should be a huge favourite with the bookies, and I'm sure he will be. I understand he hasn't fought for a while, but surely it could have been, you know, a young, ambitious British fighter, an unbeaten fighter, perhaps, who, you know, while you'd give him just as little chance of winning, at least he'd have some ambition coming in. At least there'd be some interest because they're both from Britain. They'd know the Eubank backstory. There could be some back and forth in the build-up. But no, we've got a kind of not unknown completely, but, you know, bland foreign opposition who's probably just come into, if he can last the distance, more than likely not. Yeah, it's an absolute stinker on what is otherwise a really good card. But having moaned about that, someone in the chat, who's it? John Wick says, I like young Whitaker, but it's all easy fights. Stand Ben Shalom. He's done it with Fraser Clark too. I'd be quite reluctant to call Liam Cameron an easy fight. Liam Cameron was a very good amateur, ABA champion. He recently went the distance with Lyndon Arthur, who's considered one of the top light heavyweights in the country. Split decision. I thought that was unfair. I mean, I thought Arthur should have won unanimously. However, he did well to stay in there with him. He certainly won some rounds. Arthur's, you know, beyond British level, it's fair to say. And Ben Whitaker, despite his laudable amateur achievements, is not at the top of the British division just yet. You know, people were talking about him potentially fighting Dan Aziz, I know, but, you know, he's not there yet. He's still young into his pro career. And I think Liam Cameron's a genuine test for him at this stage of his career. I had no problem with that opponent choice whatsoever. Not only that, I think Liam Cameron's ambitious. You know, he's got a second lease on life in that he had that long ban, which many people consider unfair earlier in his career. He's come back. He's worked his way up to that Lyndon Arthur fight, gave a good account of himself there, and very much deserves this chance to upset the apple cart against a piping hot prospect in Ben Whitaker. And I think he'll be in there giving it his all, as opposed to Szeremeta, and I'm sorry to cast aspersions there, but I think Liam Cameron will come and give it his all against Whitaker. Whether he'll have success, whether he'll be able to upset him is a completely different matter, but he'll certainly be going in there with a self-belief that his greater experience, his greater seasoning will, in the professional game specifically, will give him the edge against Ben Whitaker. He won't be going in there thinking he's a big underdog, despite what the bookies say. So I think that's actually a good fight. But also, I think Ayman talks about it a little bit there. Raven Chapman against Sky Nicholson. Yeah, it's not the first female fight in Saudi, but it is the first female world title fight out there, for whatever that's worth. And Raven Chapman has been at a certain level for so long now. She had that WBC international belt, I think it is. Correct me if I'm wrong. It might be silver belt, whatever it is. And she's defended it more times than people in that position usually do, because she's been in that number one spot for a long time, waiting for her chance. Sky Nicholson, we've seen her grow, defending her title abroad as well, looking really good doing so. But you've got a strong fighter, good work rate, decent technical skills in Chapman against someone who's a bit looser, bit more of an amateur boxing style, I think it's fair to say, in Nicholson. I think styles will go together really well in that fight. I think they are both super ambitious, fresh as well. They haven't been around for ages in the professional side. I think that's an excellent fight, actually. You know, maybe not, you know, big names in terms of the main eventers, obviously, but a big competitive world title fight and an important step forward, I think, for Saudi boxing as well, to have two prominent women in that position. Wally Clark, even if it isn't the grueling war it was the first time, I still think it's a really good fight between two British fighters who are looking for that springboard to world level. So I like that one too. And then Optai and Massey, I'm probably not as enthused about that as Ayman is. I think Jack Massey's a very solid fighter. I expected him to lose to Isaac Chamberlain last time out, and he did really well to get a deserved win in that fight. He is the European champion. So this isn't in the same vein as Opetaia's previous brick-bashing victories over Jordan Thompson and Ellis Zorro. In that, they're not untested. He has proved himself to be one of the best cruiserweights domestically, and we're very strong at cruiserweight domestically. We've obviously got a world champion in Chris Billam-Smith and a former world champion in Richard Riakporhe. And Lawrence Okoli, of course, has since moved up, but he was a world champion at cruiser. Jai Opetaia against Jack Massey, it's a pretty good fight. Massey comes into this fight with real momentum. He's strung together some really good wins under Joe Gallagher. They will have a game plan, as Ayman alluded to take away some of Opetaia's strengths. And let's be real, when he's not miles ahead of the opposition that he's facing, Opetaia doesn't always look as sharp. He doesn't always look super explosive. And that's not because he hasn't got talent. He's clearly one of the most talented fighters in world boxing at the moment. But there is just a hint, just a slight suspicion that Opetaia may well box based on the level of the opponent. And if someone's in there who is better than he expected him to be, maybe it becomes a long night for Opetaia. I'm certainly not, sticking my head above the parapet and picking a Massey upset in this fight before people start asking in the chat. I am picking Opetaia to win the fight, but I do feel it can be a lot harder than perhaps people out there in general are thinking.